Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there. Welcome back to Reimagining Love. I am excited to have you here with me today. We're doing something a little bit different than our usual programming, so it's something new for you and also for me. Throughout the summer, we're going to be sprinkling in some mailbag episodes in which I'll be answering several of the fantastic listener questions that come into our inbox. And by the way, I always love reading your questions. So if you want to submit one, that link is in the show notes for all of our episodes, and maybe I'll get a chance to answer it this summer even. So I'm going to tackle 3 questions today, and they're all coming into us from big cities around the world. The first is a listener in Los Angeles who is struggling with her feelings about the choice a guy that she's seeing has made, and she's not sure about how to proceed after a pretty bumpy, text exchange. Next, we're going to hear from Marina in London, who wants some extra support in the aftermath of infidelity. And she's curious about post-traumatic growth and what might be possible for herself and for her partner. And then we'll end with a question from a listener in New York, whose boyfriend of over a decade is ambivalent about the relationship and is running pretty hot and pretty cold. And she's wondering, does she cut loose? Does she stick it out and wait for him to make up his mind? I'm excited to dig into all of these questions. And just a reminder that these episodes are not a substitute for therapy. Hopefully what we talk about here is going to feel therapeutic, but I hope that our listener in Los Angeles, our listener in New York, and our listener in London all have the support and love and care that they need as they tackle these challenges. Okay, here we go. Question number 1, our listener in Los Angeles. I recently started dating again after ending a long-term relationship, and I met someone I really connected with. We had 4 great dates, and for the first time in years, I felt safe enough to be intimate again. He had no tattoos when we met, but by the 4th date, he'd gotten 2 and was planning full sleeves. This is what I texted to him after our 4th date. I know this might sound weird and maybe intrusive, but when I see tattoos, no judgment on my part at all, but I have more like a body level response that I haven't quite figured out yet. And I would hate for this to get in the way of our physical intimacy. Would you be willing to hold off on additional tattoos so that I get to know you better and I'm able to move past this? If not, I completely understand. And then this is what he said. I'm having fun with it. If it causes that much of a negative reaction, I'd say it's best to just call things here so that you can figure that out. And then this listener ends by saying, needless to say, I'm devastated. What advice do you have for me? Okay, so your feeling of devastation makes total sense to me. From where you stood, you were making a relational request. You were asking him to pause on something so that you could figure out what was going on inside of you. You were sharing a piece of data from your world. Listen, I'm having a body level response to this. I don't know yet what it means. Would you consider pausing so I can figure it out? And you didn't get back what you thought, right? You thought that he might pause. You thought that he might kind of engage further, but instead he really pulled back and pulled away. So I have a lot of thoughts and I don't want any of them to land like criticisms, but I'm just going to talk you through everything that came up for me as I read your question. And one of the first things that came up for me was I was struck by the communication modality that this conversation happened, right? You're 4 dates in. It sounds like you've been sexual in some way, shape, or form. And yet this really important relational exchange happened over text. So I flag that for all of us, that what happens when we conduct the business of our relationships, when we open up vulnerably, which you really did open up vulnerably, when we do that on text, we lose so much context. He didn't get to see softness in your face as you talked about this. He didn't get a chance, to feel you putting your foot on his foot as you talked about it, that there's a kind of intimacy developing between the two of you. You've had 4 dates. They were good dates. You were feeling stuff that you hadn't felt for a long time. And part of me is left wondering what might have gone differently had this conversation happened face to face. You also would have been able to watch his reactivity. Not that you would have pulled your request off the table, but who knows if you had watched his face drop, if you had watched, a wash of disappointment or a wash of shame come over him, you might have spoken also to, kind of checking in with him about what's going on for you, that you want these tattoos. Maybe you can help me understand that better. So I feel a measure of sadness inside of me as I read this, that I worry that the two of you didn't have everything that you needed context-wise as you approached this conversation. So that is just my invitation to you and to all of us to be really careful that the conversation modality, text versus phone versus FaceTime versus in person, matters. And I, of course, am going to always come back to the fact that we are very fancy mammals. We are animals at our core. And what that means is that safety, whether we're talking about physical safety or here emotional safety, it's an embodied experience. It is our body assessing the degree to which we are safe or unsafe moment to moment. And we lose a lot of our feelers, a lot of our spidey senses when we're sitting behind our screen. So that's just a push for all of us to do the business of love face to face. So we've got all of that data, within us and between us. Okay. I next want to go to her body level response. I think you're really wise to not override your sexual alarm system. You're wise to not override a body level response. Something in your body feels unsafe. So there's some inquiry there for you around, what do tattoos symbolize to you? What do they mean to you? What are the associations that you make to tattoos? Like literally, what are the deeper meanings that you have around tattoos? I want you to have that no matter where this particular relationship goes, because that's something important for you to understand. And frankly, I would like for you to have that from him. In the absence of understanding what this tattoo journey means for him, all you are left with is your own somatic response and then the meaning that you make of your somatic response, And I don't know what would happen if you had a better understanding of what these tattoos mean to him. If you understood that this was about his celebration of his recovery or his transformation or his connection to culture, could that soften and deactivate your alarm system? I don't know, but I wonder. When you think about the golden equation of love, there's my stuff plus your stuff equals our stuff. You've got some stuff around tattoos. He clearly has something. There's an intensity, there's an urgency, there's a kind of going from nothing to full sleeves, but we don't know what that is. That's the big question mark in this equation. And this is the dynamic it's creating. A few questions to help you as you unpack your, relationship with tattoos. What I would want you to explore is, who are you if you're partnered with a man who has tattoos, right? Who do you become in that dynamic? I want you to check in with, whose judgments are you hearing in your head, right? Who's kind of over there whispering in the corner about, oh my gosh, she's dating a guy with tattoos. Have you heard? Have you seen? Whose judgment are you fearing? And then something about culture. What are the sociodemographic associations that you have with tattoos? What do tattoos convey to you around socioeconomic status, around class, around race, around gender, around education, around privilege? What are kind of the teachings that you internalize? not of your own making, right? You were socialized because we all were socialized. So what are those old stories? And are there some ways where maybe it would help you to be liberated from them? Okay. So the other thing that's happening here, I think, is something around power and control. When he made this choice to begin to tattoo himself, I wonder if the threat, right? We're saying your body perceived threat, you had a somatic response. What was the threat? And I wonder if the threat was that it really kind of confronted you with his separateness. That even somebody who can be whatever he was, kind, connected, attuned, that he is deeply, deeply separate from you. That even as the two of you are building this connection, he is his own person and he can make his own choices. And if that felt really like confusing to you or disturbing to you, that it felt like a loss of control. So I'm wondering what connections you may make to that and what other times in your life you've had that experience where you thought things were going one way and they made a 90-degree turn, you know? And here, that 90-degree turn was that he made a choice around his body that you didn't see coming and you didn't know about it and you weren't consulted on it. What are the prior experiences you've had with that kind of like right-hand turn that you didn't see coming? And if you can make that connection, that's when we do that kind of that was then, this is now, that desire to manage somebody else because of what feels out of control on your own insides. That might be your job to soothe. Can you soothe that part of yourself? Can you say to that part of yourself, you're right, little part. When we were younger, there was something that hit us out of the blue. We didn't see it coming. And that left us feeling alone, overwhelmed, isolated, unprotected. But that was then, this is now. What this is a man who's making choices with his body. That's okay. We can handle that, So what's the kind of historic tie for you there? I also wonder what happened for him when you asked for what you needed, when you made this relational bid. Did it feel to him like you were trying to take control? And what did that awaken in him? What is his legacy there around a hypercritical parent, a demanding parent? Did he feel like what you were saying is who you are isn't enough? Did he feel like you were saying, I'm disappointed in you? Did he feel like you were saying, in order to be loved by me, I need to have control of you? I don't think that's what you were saying in any way, shape, or form. But is that how it landed for him? And what is his history there of a pairing for him between love and control? And what would be the work that he would need to do to say to himself and his little part, listen, all she's doing is asking us to pause. She loves us. She's here with us. She's excited to build a relationship with us. She's just asking for me to slow down. That's not the same as my hypercritical parent. That's not the same as the person who micromanaged every move that I made. That's not what's happening here. I get that it feels like it, but that was then, this is now. So I suspect you both were getting tangled up in some old history. Okay, let's leave it there. Bottom line here goes back to the golden equation of love. My stuff plus your stuff equals our stuff. You've got some stuff coming up and you are recognizing that it's yours to figure out, why am I having this strong of a reaction to a choice that this new partner of mine is making? He also has some stuff, why is his reaction to your bid to pull away and shut down? All right. That's what I've got for you there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sending us this question. This question is fascinating because it is literally skin deep. A tattoo is only skin deep and it is really, really profound. And I explored with you here the intra-psychic layers, what was getting activated inside of you, what might have been getting activated inside of him, the interpersonal layers, the kind of you made a bid, you asked for something and he had a particular response to pull away in the face of that. And we looked at kind of the cultural background layers that might be informing and shaping how each of you came into this dynamic. So wishing you well and sending you love. Okay, question number 2 from Marina in London. Hi, Dr. Solomon. I have learned so much from you, in particular from your podcasts and e-course about infidelity. There was one aspect about infidelity recovery that I think might be interesting to hear more of your thoughts on. The equivalent of post-traumatic growth after betrayal repair. This would be in the context where a couple has decided to stay together and both parties are putting in so much work to make it happen. I can feel myself healing from betrayal, but I would love some positive inspiration and motivation to aspire towards regarding what a relationship after infidelity could be like in the most positive sense. I love your perspective and kind approach. Thank you for what you do. Well, first of all, Marina, thank you for your warm words. And I'm so glad that prior episodes about infidelity and that the infidelity e-course have been a support to you and your partner as the two of you move through recovery. And the fact that you are even asking this question shows, the progress that you must be making in your journey. And it makes total sense to me that you could use just some motivation and some inspiration. And as you know, I've been a couple therapist for almost 30 years, and definitely over half of my cases are infidelity recovery cases. So I have been in the trenches with lots of couples over lots of stretches of time. And what continues to stand out to me about infidelity recovery work is that it is simultaneously really freaking hard and potentially really freaking beautiful. I suspect, Marina, that you already have, significant evidence for both the difficulty and the beauty. I think there's something so powerful about two people who choose to rebuild a relationship. Infidelity is a turning point. There is a part 1 and a part 2. It is a line in the sand. As Esther Perel says, the marriage that you had is over. And the question is, what do you want to build now? Embedded in that turning point, embedded in that line of the sand is the question, does this relationship continue? Right? It is truly standing on the edge of the cliff, looking over, knowing full well that this absolutely could be a relationship ender. And so then for couples who even entertain the possibility of rebuilding, to do that is to choose to stay, you know, not to stay forever, right? It's to choose to stay for long enough that we can figure out what a path forward looks like and what is possible in terms of rebuilding. And what's so powerful in that is that you both know that you are now partnered with somebody who actually has the power to choose. I mean, obligation may be in the picture, duty may be in the picture. There's lots of complexities here, but you know that your partner is choosing to turn back toward you. There's choice in that. And there's something that's very powerful about being chosen by someone who has the power to choose. There's also something so powerful about really feeling your own power to choose. And there's something that maybe also feels precarious about that, because whatever we're doing here, we're doing because we've agreed that we're going to try. It is driven and fueled by our willingness to keep showing up. So that makes it precarious, because what if we stop trying? But it makes it also really sacred. There's something so sacred about couples who explore the possibility of this marriage 2.0. So Marina's referencing post-traumatic growth, and that is a term from the field of psychology from like the mid 90s, where, we talk a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And some researchers were like, wait a minute, it's more than that. There certainly is pain after a trauma, after something that is overwhelming. And for some people, there's also growth. And it's so confusing, isn't it? That there's a thing that happened that you wish hadn't happened, that you wouldn't want your worst enemy to have to deal with, but it happened. And you can feel ways that this terrible thing is also growing you or changing you in ways that you like and feel proud of. So the 5 pillars of post-traumatic growth are: 1, an appreciation of life and a deepened sense of purpose. 2 is deepened and more vulnerable relationships with others. 3 is new possibilities, things that you might try that you maybe wouldn't have tried before. 4 is personal strength. Like sometimes it's like, I'm resilient, but I wish I didn't have to frickin' be resilient. But there can be a kind of strength that comes and is one of these pillars of post-traumatic growth. And then 5 is spiritual change, like a kind of connection to something bigger than yourself. And so what Marina is saying is like, can those pillars of post-traumatic growth also be applied to post-infidelity recovery work? And I would say absolutely yes. The thing that I hear over and over again, especially from betrayed partners who are considering and working towards reconciliation, is I'm not staying in some C plus marriage anymore. Like, if this happened in part because we both were asleep at the switch, because we really weren't investing the way we needed to be investing, then I'm not, this has got to be something extraordinary. What we build from here has got to be something intentional and something that we can both feel proud of. And I think that right there is a sign of growth. It's like, we're not going back to status quo. We're going to build something on a different foundation, on a more robust foundation, on a more alive foundation, because this pain that I'm going through right now needs to feel worth it in some way, shape, or form. We got to build something that is really pretty dynamite here, which doesn't mean perfect, right? It does not mean perfect, but it means something where we are tending to the dynamics between us, where we are each able to raise concerns, where we are each able to feel seen and felt and heard and understood in ways that maybe we weren't before, in ways that perhaps neither of us had modeled for us. And it's never going to be like, thank you for cheating so we could get to this place. But it might be, the cheating is what woke us up to the fact that we were really not giving ourselves and each other what we needed here. So, what are the things that I see when a couple is showing signs of post infidelity growth? I think one is when not all roads lead back to the infidelity. When a misunderstanding can just be a misunderstanding and doesn't need to get directly tied to the infidelity, which, listen, that takes a long time. That is not early stage stuff. That is longer term. But there's something so liberating for both the betrayed partner and the betraying partner to be able to have a dust up that feels like it just kind of is in that realm of like ordinary marital stuff, rather than making a direct tie between this dust up and the trauma of infidelity. When I see that in a couple, when I see a couple have a problem and it doesn't kind of take them all the way back down into the really deep, hard stuff about the infidelity, I flag that and I note that. And I want the couple to really like take that in, that is pretty extraordinary. There's a kind of that to me is a sign of growth and repair. I think moments of joy and silliness and play and pleasure and levity are also humongous signs of growth. And those need to not be underestimated for a moment. The only way we can like truly laugh with somebody else is if we feel safe. We can force a laugh, we can fake a laugh, but an actual laugh is a reflection of safety. It's a reflection of I can let my guard down with you. It's a reflection of I can take a risk with you. And so I think that's also a sign of post-traumatic growth, when it feels safe enough to play, because we can't be playful and frozen. We can't be playful and dissociated. We can't be playful and hypervigilant. Those states don't go together. So I think that also is something I want couples to be paying attention to, are these moments of levity. And they aren't, they're not about like letting the betraying partner off the hook, but they are signs that the two of you as a couple are kind of finding your way forward. You're finding restored authenticity in your connection with each other. I think that's also something to be creating the context for, looking for moments of, and celebrating, not diminishing. My last thought here would be wanting the two of you to together be marking the milestones. Certainly the 1-year anniversary of the day of disclosure or discovery is a really challenging day. And what I want couples to do on that anniversary is to hold the both and of the pain and the grief that the anniversary evokes, as well as being able to name and honor everything that the two of you have moved through in the last year. Kind of like, what are you proud of in terms of how far you've come? Even if part of it is looking at how far you still have to go. But I would want all three of those parts to be present as you mark an anniversary, like the 1-year anniversary, is naming the grief, that it is still sad, it's still so unfortunate, it's still so painful, it's still so confusing. Naming the progress, what are we really proud of for each of us about what we've done over the last year, how we have shifted the risks we've taken. And then 3 is like, where do we go from here? What are the next steps looking like? What do we feel like our growing edges are? How are we stretching? How are we growing? So I think something like an anniversary is a nice touch point to do that. And there might be other sort of milestones that the two of you have. And whenever you feel like you are at one of those thresholds, to check in with yourselves and each other in those ways, naming the pain, naming the progress, naming what you're seeing as what each of you is needing and wanting next. Okay, Marina, thank you so much for that question. I think that's going to land for a lot of listeners. And by the way, if you are listening and you are not so familiar with the infidelity content that I've created so far, we've got links in the show notes to the e-course and to other episodes that have been on the topic, the really difficult, complicated topic of infidelity. Okay, question 3. Anonymous listener in New York. She writes, my boyfriend of 13 years broke up with me 1 month ago on our anniversary and around my birthday unintentionally. And the unintentionally is in quotes. We've had about 5 conversations since. I initiated them all. He went from, I don't feel the same way anymore, to, I'm terrified of life without you. Maybe we could end up together, maybe not, to, I care and love you, but I think it's the right decision for now, to, I'm thinking about all the things I'm giving up. I still think there's a good chance that we get back together, but I don't want you waiting. He wants to stay connected, including location sharing. He's worried about me, but still wants to explore life without me, including dating, saying he has to take this risk to mitigate his current doubts. He's scared of this happening if we got married. His parents didn't have a happy marriage, but mine are still together. So he says his fear is not easy for me to understand. He doesn't know what he wants in the future. I still want to be together. Should I try moving on while holding on to hope? Or should I just accept that we won't get back together? Ugh, my heart hurts even reading this question. You are really, really going through it. So, of course, the thing that I want first and foremost is him in some really, really good individual therapy. I really want him making connections between the family of origin dynamics he experienced and his deep and powerful and entrenched relational ambivalence with you. You are going through a real push and pull. When he gets close to you, then he feels smothered, like he needs space. When it feels real for him that he's going to lose you, then he wants to kind of pull you closer. This is exhausting for you. And every cycle of tear and repair is an attachment injury. So that's the difficult thing with this. Sometimes I call couples like you guys boomerang couples, where we're together, apart, together, apart. Each of those swings is an attachment injury. It's like 2 things at once. Each of those swings reflects an attachment injury, and each of those swings creates an attachment injury. So part of the problem here is that this process takes on a life of its own. I want to say really clearly that I think it's incredibly brave of you to attempt to hold steady while he swings wildly. I think there's something incredibly loving about that. But what I want to invite you to look at is how your holding steady becomes part of the dance. I get why you're doing it, right? You're doing it because you love him. You're doing it because you want this relationship to go. You want to build a future with him. And I think you're doing it because you want to be patient with what he's describing as family of origin wounds, right? You know that his past is getting in the way here. So for all those reasons, you are working hard to be patient. But your patience then becomes part of this dance where it's like the more you hold steady, the more he feels like he can swing. And I don't know what it's like for him to watch you hold steady while he swings. I think sometimes in a situation like that, the person who's swinging, the person who's ambivalent, has a hard time continuing to respect the one who's holding steady, which is not fair. I'm not justifying it. But it's like the more you hold steady, the easier it is for him to keep being indecisive, to keep pushing and pulling, because he is able to kind of make you a smaller and smaller variable in the equation, you know? And it's harder and harder for him to hold you as a full, separate human being with your own desires because you are being so self-sacrificing for the sake of the relationship. I also suspect that what happens for him is when he swings like this, he sees the pain on your face, he knows the harm he's doing, and that creates shame. And the shame then is in dialogue with the other parts of himself that are ashamed for not knowing, ashamed for not feeling like he can be a steady partner, afraid that he can't really, be with you long term, afraid that nobody else is actually going to love him. So it's like, I think there's a way in which your steadiness inadvertently fuels whatever shame he's got and whatever shame is driving this ambivalence in the first place. So I think there's a structural change that needs to happen, So like just to cut to the chase here, your question is, should I try moving on while holding on to hope, or should I just accept that we won't get back together? I think there needs to be an actual stepping away where you actually do grieve the loss of him. You actually do start to fill in those spaces that feel like they've been left vacant, by stepping away from him. I want you surrounded by friends and family. I want you fueling yourself with your interests and your passions and your hobbies, even as you tend to your grieving heart. And I want that for you because that truly is like actually taking space would be really the only way I could imagine this ever having a future, is that there needs to be some actual space for him to feel what it's like to not have you. And even if in part you're doing like a fake it till you make it kind of a thing, you could do that. You could be filling your life and really actually day by day practicing who you are outside of this relationship, reminding yourself who you are outside of this relationship, even though it's a 13-year relationship and you might have been very young when the two of you started, you actually were a whole self before this relationship began. So for you to be reconnecting to your whole self, even as you feel confused, heartbroken, despairing, I want you doing that work because it's a process I want you engaging in regardless of the outcome. I think it's the only route where this relationship would have a chance of coming back together, but that only can happen if you guys actually have this space and he does his own work and he puts both of his feet on solid ground and gets clear about what he wants and why he wants it and how he's going to make it happen. And he can't or he won't do that as long as he knows that you're waiting. And I think that you need to feel your way back into your own power because I suspect that this has taken a toll on you. I suspect that you are now full of stories about your own, just who you are as a person, as you wait, as you hope, as you accommodate. So I want you to be able to step away and kind of fill yourself back up because then what it might be down the road is two whole people who are actually choosing to repair, but it can't happen until and unless there's been some space. I want you looking at where did you see this modeled, that love equals forever patience? Did you see that in your family? Did you watch a parent stay steady while the other parent battled addiction perhaps? Or like, what are the historical roots for you about this? I also want you journaling on this question of what would you want for your best friend? If your best friend was in this spot, what would you want for them? I want you journaling on this question. What would you choose for yourself if you had an unshakable faith in your ability to choose wisely and choose well for yourself? I want to validate that you may always love him. I suspect you will always love him. I suspect that you may feel, even when you're 85 years old, a pang when you think of him if you guys end up not together. But I also want you to feel really anchored in your own worthiness and to know and trust and believe that you get to have a partner who's choosing you. Like you get to have that. I want you to have that. This is the last thing I'll say is I want to know who's with you in this journey. I worry that perhaps you are protecting your friends and family from knowing what's going on because you are protective of him. So I want to know who else, like who's in the trenches with you, just because it's big. It's big. And I worry and suspect that maybe it's lonely for you to be in this by yourself. And there's a part of me, I guess, that wants you to have witnessing eyes. My friend Kim calls them witnessing eyes. So that when you talk to your besties or your family, people who are safe, when you talk to them and you watch kind of their responses to what's going on, what does that validate for you? What does that awaken in you? What does that remind you of? Like, if it's hard for you to really trust your own worthiness in this moment, can you see it reflected on the faces of people that you love? And could that be a source of strength? I don't want your friends and family judging you or judging him. It's not about that. It's not about them pressuring you or pulling you. It's about you having that validation that this is freaking hard. This is a lot of push and pull. This is a lot of back and forth. And we can see, sweet lady, the toll it's taking on you. I want you to be able to see that on somebody else's face because it may be hard for you to get in touch with it yourself. Okay, loves, we did it. We covered a lot of ground with these 3 questions. So thank you to the 3 listeners, listener in Los Angeles, our listener in London, our listener in New York. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us and giving us a chance to explore together. And I hope that you found my responses to be helpful and supportive. We will be back with more mailbag episodes later on this summer. So if you want to submit a question for consideration, follow that link in the show notes. And you can be anonymous, of course, if you want to be. Until next time, be well. Thank you for listening to our show. Our producers are Elizabeth Vogt and Mary Chan and Katie Pagich of Organized Sound Productions. Our theme music was composed by Slade Warnkin. The show is executive produced by me, Dr. Alexandra Solomon. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.